Viewers, as we've been indicating to you that there were fears that the casualty count could go up. Now, ANI has reported and quoted government sources saying at least 20 Indian soldiers have been killed in a violent face-off with China in Galwan Valley in eastern Ladakh. This is the information that has been put out by the ANI. We don't have a government official statement on this yet, but ANI is quoting government sources to say 20 Indian soldiers have been killed in this clash with China. Remember, earlier in the afternoon, we had information about 3 soldiers. Let's go across to Srinjoy Chaudhary, who also has more information on it. Srinjoy, what is it that your sources are telling you about the casualty in this clash?
Well, as far as fatal casualties are concerned on the Indian side, the Times Group has ascertained, yes, the number is 20. This we have heard from top sources in the government. The number is 20. There have been similar casualties. We would not like to mention exactly how many on the Chinese side, but if you took they killed and injured, it would be quite a lot. It has to be said that not all of them were killed. All the Indian soldiers died right there in Galwan. Many of them were injured and seriously injured and critically injured in this fight that happened with iron rods and stones. They were attacked with iron rods and stones, it has to be remembered. And it has to be said that the number we are looking at is 20. The Chinese have also suffered heavy casualties. The Indian Army has said that, well, the Chinese will tell the world about their casualties, how many they have suffered, how many fatal, how many injured, so on. But the Indian side has suffered about 20 fatal casualties, and we know that quite a lot of Indian soldiers are injured. So a few are missing now, but the important number is 20 because this is a huge number. It brings to mind perhaps Uri. It brings to mind a recent event in the Northeast. But the important point is that 20 is a very huge number, and we will have to see how the government deals with it now, because after 20 fatal casualties, how will a government react to this border situation in China, with China?
Yes, 20 is a huge number, Srinjoy. And you know, in the evening, you were reporting as well that there are soldiers that have been injured, and there was a fear that the casualty count that we knew at that point could have gone up. Are there more soldiers? Have they been brought back to the base, put up in hospitals? Do we know beyond these 20 lives lost if there are more who are injured and in the hospital?
Yes, there are many who are injured and many of whom will recover. About that, there is no dispute. This was a particularly fierce battle and fought with all the things that you would not like people to fight with, iron rods, stones, and so on. The important point here is that it is a lot of casualties, a lot of people fatally killed, a lot of people injured. So we will have to see the repercussions of it. What will it mean with vis-a-vis India's relations with China? What will it mean vis-a-vis the current Ladakh situation? How will India deal with that? 20, as you rightly said, is a really serious number.
Absolutely. Srinjoy Chaudhary, thank you so much for bringing us that update. We will keep coming back to you as information continues to flow in from various parts. Not a statement, official statement, but this is what the sources are suggesting right now. I've also got former diplomat Shilkant Sharma on the phone line with me. But before I can come to you, Mr. Sharma, I want to bring in our managing editor, Vinay Tiwari, as well on this. Vinay, 20 soldiers lost, martyred in this clash. I don't even know if it's a clash anymore.
Yes, and look, it's as devastating a piece of information as you could imagine. I mean, we were hearing unofficially that the count that the first statement that was given as 3 was lower, and that the actual count was much higher. In fact, most of our sources were suggesting that the battle that happened last night was much more intense than what was being made out. and those worst fears have now come true. So this is as dramatic and as tectonic and as devastating a piece of information that could have come for the Indian government, because remember, the government has been trying very hard to play down what's been happening at the border for the last couple of months or so. We've also seen a little bit of an opacity in terms of the responses that have come even today. I mean, except for the earlier army statement which talked about 3 casualties and then a very plain statement from the MEA, we haven't heard anyone from the government actually speak about this issue, which now probably is the worst crisis that this particular government has faced. I mean, the fact that it's come in the middle of another pandemic war that we are fighting could have happened at the worst time. I mean, this is a huge development now, and this is going to alter a lot of things for the government going forward on how to tackle with this enormous development at the Indo-China border, Tanvi.
Yes, because Vinay, we have not seen a single casualty in all of these standoffs and skirmishes that have happened with China in the recent past for many, many years. I'm actually trying to remember, when was the last time we actually saw soldiers dying or being killed in a face-off with China. And this is one which has led to 20 soldiers being martyred. It's the result of a build-up that has happened for the past 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, there have been reports coming about the Chinese build-up, alleged transgression, the Indian response to strengthen our presence there, to move in more soldiers. And just when we were looking at a de-escalation, just when we began to talk about Chinese soldiers pulling back, they have turned around and done this. We don't know yet, Vinay, because there is no confirmation if any guns were used. But all the initial reports suggested that this was a hand-to-hand fight. This was a stones and clubs and poles fight that seems to have claimed 20 of our lives.
Absolutely. In fact, the first information when it came in from the army statement about, a colonel's death and the 2 Jawans who also got killed while trying to help him or save him, our sources had indicated to us that this was actually iron rods and poles, and iron poles that are used in that part of the terrain that were used in hitting the Indian side. They also used stones, and it seems that most of the other injuries are also similar. I mean, we are also hearing reports that the Chinese PLA used clubs which had barbed wire, strung around it, because barbed wire is again something that is used or carried by the armed forces in that part of the world. So very obviously, this was not just a small skirmish, this was a bitter battle. And the bitter battle must have lasted for hours, because if you have casualty count to the level that we are now being told, as well as the casualty count that is now being told from the Chinese side, this was a very, very intense battle. So things didn't just go wrong, Tanvi. Something went horribly wrong yesterday. I mean, this is a massive development. I cannot even stress, the enormity of the number of death count that we have now heard, because this has never happened before on the Indo-China border, as you were mentioning. The last time that all your experts on the show earlier in the evening, when we were talking to all the, the generals and other experts, they've been mentioning that we've had skirmishes. We may have had an isolated violent act maybe in the 70s or so, but since then, we've never really had a situation of this sort unfolding. And if the count that you were using to discuss at 9 p.m., 3 was not enough, now we hear 20. So this just kind of multiplies the enormity of the problem many times over, Tanvi.
Yes, and the initial reports that suggested that the talks will not get derailed. Vinay, this is going to be like you said, perhaps the worst crisis and a challenge for the Modi government. Now, from here on, it's a completely different matter to handle a country like Pakistan, and a completely different matter to handle a country like China. And we have to keep in mind, viewers, and if I can go across to Mr. Shilkan Sharma if he's there, handling China isn't just about one state's border, not just about Ladakh. It goes all the way from there to Himachal, Uttarakhand, all along right up to the disagreements and disputes that we have in Sikkim, and then to the far northeast and Arunachal Pradesh. And we've had problems in many of these locations all along this line of actual control. Don't forget, Pakistan is China's friend. Already in the evening, we had experts who were telling us the movement on the Pakistani end has also begun. They themselves are preparing and strengthening their presence. This is going to be a tricky one, Mr. Sharma. I don't remember such a clash unfold perhaps since the 1962 war, where 20 of our soldiers have died.
Well, the way it was described, since the evening, this figure was on the horizon. Maybe your channel got it later, but I heard about it at 7:38 that it could be 20. Then they said it was 11
Yes.
killed and maybe 9 were missing. Now, the kind of a ferocious fight which happened, and the premeditated nature of that fight, because the Chinese carried these stuff with them, and they attacked their office commander, our commanding officer. So this would have infuriated our troops, and then the reaction would have been, you can imagine. You see, on a larger issue, it has actually, you are right, it has actually enormously challenged the diplomatic forum. Whatever diplomatic move you can do to solve this problem, it is heavily burdened now. It is heavily burdened not because of what happened, but what went behind it, what the premeditation behind it. And, as Henry Kissinger said, that if there is no common set of principles which the two powers agree, then diplomatic solution then goes out of the window, and then power play begins. Now, this seems to be the moment, at least in the case of India and China, because China seems to accept no diplomatic common points. The way last 6 weeks have gone, and the way we have been talking to them, and the way we have been talking for disengagement, and they shatter the disengagement agreement, it seems to indicate that they are on a high, and nothing that we do with them seems to so far satisfy them. So that's why this power play, a very naked power play at the ground in the border, is in witness. And so I cannot say how to handle this, except that the determination of India, which is conveyed that India is determined to solve it through dialogue and through in a peaceful means, and India is determined to de-escalate the situation. I think that message makes your diplomatic process stronger. But you have to be prepared, because this is a kind of a treachery which they are capable of. I want to tell you something which is very, after the Second World War, I think one of these, was it Russell or Churchill or Einstein, they said that we don't know what the Third World War will be like, but the fourth one will be fought with stones. So I think the Chinese are hastening that process.
Yes. In fact, I just want to also highlight this, the information that is also coming in, basis sources right now, about the casualties of the Chinese side. And the Indian intercepts are actually revealing that there may be 43 casualties as far as the Chinese are concerned. That's how ugly and violent this clash was. This fight that happened between the Indian and the Chinese army, this fight that began by Chinese attacking us, has led to 43 of their soldiers being killed, and as per government sources, 20 of our soldiers martyred last night. General Ashok Mehta is back with me on the phone line. General Mehta, to what we were alluding to and referring to about a possibility of the casualty count going up, it now seems that we may have lost 20 of our brave hearts. Help us understand what kind of clash leads to such high count of casualties.
So, in the international record book, 63 people being killed in unarmed combat must be a world record. Absolutely unprecedented, never heard of. Guinness's book, Limca's book. It's absolutely beguiling how this has happened. That's the first point. And the second point is why should I believe ANI that 43 Chinese have been killed? Why should I believe ANI, which is virtually a government agency, when it puts out 43 killed? And the Chinese may not put out their casualties, but why should I believe ANI? You can say, okay, estimate it, but to say that we have killed 43 Chinese is absolutely very unreasonable to assume that I, as a veteran commentator, will go by what the ANI is saying. ANI will give our figures accurately.
Right, but General Mehta, we are waiting for a government to give us a statement. Yes, indeed, and the government needs to tell us. Of course, you're right. As far as the Chinese are concerned, we don't know. I don't think the Chinese will ever admit, or even if they put out any information, how credible that will be, to what extent we can trust that, we don't know. General Ashok Mehta, thank you so much for taking our call at this hour and responding to the information that is coming in. The government sources suggesting that 20 of Indian soldiers were killed in the clashes that took place with the Chinese side last night in the Galwan Valley. Viewers, Vinay Tiwari continues to stay with us. I'm going to take a very short break, come back with lots more. Stay with me. Welcome back, viewers. Government sources, as being reported by ANI, seem to suggest that 20 Indian soldiers have been killed in the clash that took place with the Chinese last night in Galwan Valley. 20, and not just 3 that we spoke about through the day. We don't have a government statement yet. The MEA statement that came out earlier in the evening simply spoke about how China had unilaterally broken the pact, the agreement to de-escalate, and unilaterally changed the status quo, but India still believes in the need for dialogue and resolving the situation via dialogue. Vinay Tiwari continues to stay with us, but before that, let me quickly bring in Maroof Raza as well. Maroof, right now, the government sources are telling us that 20 soldiers may have been killed. Maroof, that's a very big number. Not something we've seen in a really long time, definitely not in any of our clashes with China.
Yes, as I had said earlier in the day, that you see, if an officer of the rank of a colonel has been killed, then the casualties being just 2 doesn't seem to add up. there would have been a far more serious altercation and perhaps even exchange of fire, which they have not admitted.
I'm going to try and get Maroof Raza back with us, a consulting editor to the Times Network, an expert when it comes to these situations. But Vinay, also now, to put this in the light of the MEA statement, a very carefully worded statement, really so to see, not a statement of assertion as a nation, a statement in response to the queries from the media.
Yes, but I wanted to make a distinction between what the MEA would be expected to do in this situation and what the army or the government of India would need to do in this situation. Look, we've now had about, General Mehta and Mr. Shilkant Sharma said that we've been hearing about these death count rising from 7:30 onwards, and that is true. We didn't put it out because it was not getting attributed to anybody, and we put it out now only because we now hear it from official sources and via agencies which deal with the government. But having said that, what is confounding me is this, that now we've had over a couple of hours since most, of people are speculating about the casualty count rising. The number is now being pegged at 20 on the Indian side and 43 on the Chinese side. With such an enormity of tasks, the least that I think the government needs to do immediately is to issue an official statement, because the lack of an official statement just adds to more speculation. And this is not the time when speculation is actually required, because General Mehta was right about one thing, that if we just simply add the count that is being claimed on the Chinese side and the count on the Indian side, 63 people dying in a war or in a combat where no bullets were fired is rather unprecedented. The simple enormity of what has happened requires the government an official formal statement which explains exactly what happened, or at least lets us know the count of people who are dead and those who may have been injured in this, because this is just way too serious, and it shouldn't be left to the social media or to other speculative mechanisms for this kind of information supply to go on. Remember, there are a large number of people who have friends and relatives who probably are deployed in that part of the world, and the first thing we really need is to give out accurate information and not based on unofficial information that seems to be coming in at this point of time, Tanvi.
No, absolutely, Vinay. Like you rightly pointed out, the fact of the matter is that a lot of this information was indicated to us as well from many sources, but we wouldn't speculate. It wouldn't be right for us to put it out. It wouldn't be fair to the soldiers, to the army, to those whose relatives are posted there, are deployed currently in that location. Obviously, so we have to wait for the government to give us a clearer picture of whatever the government deems fit. But if there are lives that have been lost, and it's now almost 24 hours since the incident ended, if there are soldiers who've been injured and brought back and are being treated, and if we have given a befitting response to the Chinese as well in that clash, and there have been casualties on that end, this is something that we hope the government tells us, lest it just leads to all of this speculation and wild reportage all over social media, which is not required at the moment. Very quickly, Maroof was making a point. Maroof, go ahead, finish that point, please, and then I'll go across to Snehesh Philip, also a senior journalist joining us right now, but to Maroof first.
See, Tanvi, what I was trying to say is that, when an officer of the rank of colonel is reported killed, he doesn't die in isolation in places like this. He normally operates from well outside small arms range, which could be up to 1 kilometer or beyond whatever is the front line. Or if he's on the front line, then he's accompanied by several other soldiers, and only 2 of them normally do not die in a skirmish. So therefore, the point Vinay also made, that 63 or more people having been killed on either side, I don't think they die. These number of people die just by pushing and jostling and hitting each other with iron rods and sticks. There is a certain amount of firing that's been taken place out there already, and this may lead to more altercations and more firing. The second thing is that the government, on one side, is facing a dilemma of giving only need-to-know basis information. In an era where social media can go viral in no time, please remember that it is the government has to do a tough balancing act between how much to tell and not tell. When the Nathula incident happened in 1967, for a variety of reasons, I mean, the media was not as active then, but very little or virtually nothing was reported for a long time. Only historians later dug it out. So here, whether they'll do that or whether they'll allow the media to go ballistic, it's a big challenge that the spokespeople of the government have to take. And thirdly, we are facing a situation which is a mix between the Kargil intrusions and the opposite of the Doklam situation. But what I feel, and it hasn't come out very clearly, only one person said so in some of the debates, that the government has given field commanders the freedom to take action. If that be it, please expect some more military action from our end, because it's not going to end just because somebody picks up a phone line from Delhi to...
Sorry, I'm interrupting you. I just want to read out the official confirmation that is coming in from the Indian Army now. The Indian Army has released a statement saying that the Indian and Chinese troops have disengaged at the Galwan area where they had earlier clashed on the night of 15-16 June 2020. 17 Indian troops who were critically injured in the line of duty at the standoff location and exposed to sub-zero temperatures. Remember, viewers, extreme climate at this high altitude. And that's what the army is saying. Those soldiers who were injured have succumbed to their injuries, taking the total that were killed in action to 20. This is the official confirmation coming in from the Indian Army now. The 20 soldiers were killed in the clash last night with the Chinese side. Indian Army further says in a statement that the army is firmly committed to protecting the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the nation. This is the statement that has been put out by the Indian Army, officially confirming 20 soldiers have been killed. This isn't just a skirmish, a scuffle. This is barely even a clash. It is much more serious than that. 20 of Indian soldiers have been killed. Sources suggest perhaps the casualty count on the Chinese side is higher. But it's our guys that we must be concerned about, the fact that at a point where a de-escalation should have happened, we have ended up being targeted and attacked by the Chinese. And in that fight, when the commanding officer gets targeted and his unit responds, it turns into an ugly clash where 20 of our soldiers have now been martyred. Time for a break. Stay with us.